a third thumb, space Legos, AI Jesus, lab-grown cocoa, radioactive rhinos, and a laser message urging aliens to visit Kentucky. You know, science and technology does wonders for our modern world, and it also does a lot of weird and strange shit. I'm Greg Ott, and here at the News Refresh, we've collected some of the best weird, interesting, funny, offbeat, and strange science and technology stories we've covered over the past year, and present them to you here as our top 12 unusual science and tech stories of 2024. Before we dive in, give us a like and a hot subscribe to get more stuff like this in your feed. And with that, at number 12, here's a happy-looking fellow from back in April. It's like looking into a mirror, right? This is fresh video out of the Creative Machines Lab at Columbia University, where this PhD engineering student is working with this disembodied robot head to help it practice its smile and other frightening expressions using an impressive 26 robotic facial muscles. Now, the idea behind this presumably Ned Stark member of the Blue Man Group isn't some soft relaunch of the Chevy Chase show. According to a new study by this engineering student's research team that was just published in Science Robotics, which is where these videos originate from, our robot named Emo here uses high-res cameras embedded in its fake pupils to make eye contact with humans. Perhaps one small step towards a robot earnestly declaring their love to you, or at the very least, helping pull off an authentic eye contact heavy Prost before chugging beers with its German robot friends. But eye contact alone isn't the most impressive capability of our friendly face here. Using artificial intelligence, emphasis on the artificial, this thing is capable of predicting a human's facial expression and then mimicking it back. In fact, it's actually able to predict a smile on a human's face 840 milliseconds before that person actually smiles. But who's counting? Only for this robot to ultimately co-express that smile simultaneously with the real person. This team says they've been working on this project for more than 5 years, and notes that while there have been significant breakthroughs in verbal AI communications, through things like large language models that power ChatGPT and other generative AI tools, progress in nonverbal communications have still lagged behind. The lead author of this study told the Columbia Engineering Newsroom that he hopes that expressive robots like these will observe and interpret facial expressions like a real person to help build trust between humans and robots in the future. Don't look so surprised. There, that's better. Next up at number 11 from May, check out this innovative orangutan.
This is the first time that we observed a wild great ape using a plant, a potent medical plant, in order to treat his wounds.
Yeah, you heard that right. That's a cognitive biologist with the Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior, and she's talking about this. A new study published in Scientific Reports. Active self-treatment of a facial wound with a biologically active plant by a male Sumatran orangutan. Or in English, or at least non-biologist, an ape chewed on a leaf and stuck it to its face as though it were a band-aid.
He was observed feeding on this plant for 13 minutes, and then he continued chewing but stopped swallowing, and put the plant sap from his mouth precisely onto the wound.
So our biologist here was the lead author of this study, which was based on behavior recorded in 2022 after it's believed our adult male orangutan here got involved in some sort of altercation with another animal. Who knows what started that fight? Maybe Conor McGregor egged him on or something. But either way, after it went down and our orangutan here was injured, the animal began to treat its own wound.
And he repeated this behavior for 7 minutes. So over and over, he put plant sap onto the wound. And then later, he also took the more solid plant matter from his mouth and put it on top of his wound, fully covering the wound.
Now, in previous research, scientists have recorded instances of other primates foraging for medicines in forests and treating themselves with plants. Everything from swallowing leaves to get rid of parasites, to chewing on plants to soothe their stomachs. For all we know, all those damn Koroks in the Zelda games are simply doing their best to recover from a bunch of face transplants or something. But the research team behind this study claims they observed for the first time active wound treatment with a known biologically active plant substance by a male Sumatran orangutan in the wild. And their hypothesis suggests this may have been a form of self-medication to possibly prevent infection and accelerate wound healing.
Humans show active wound treatment, and we also know that chimpanzees show wound treatment, the example of the chimpanzees in Gabon, and also now Asian great apes, so a wild Sumatran orangutan showed wound treatment. Therefore, it's possible that there exists like a common underlying mechanism for the recognition and also application of substances with medical or functional properties to wounds. And it's also possible that our last common ancestor already showed similar ointment behavior.
Yeah, Kind of like your mom kissing your knee after you take a tumble on your rollerblades, this could be something of an innate instinct here.
So it's possible that the behavior is actually shown in his birth population, and he might have learned it from his mother or another orangutan. And we know that orangutans do social learning, so they show peering, which is close distance observation of another. So they sometimes come close 10 to 20 centimeters, watching another, for example, processing and opening a fruit in order probably to learn the mechanism how to do it.
This is a single observation, so they saw one orangutan have this behavior, right? So on its own, if this was the only report on anything related to medication, you would say, well, we need more evidence.
That's a biologist with Emory University who had nothing to do with this study, but nevertheless spoke with the Associated Press.
But I think there's a few key things here that really make me convinced that it is a form of animal self-medication. And one of them is, as we said before, the orangutan really specifically applied the mixture that it made to the wound, no other body parts. It's very directed in what it was doing.
Researchers plan to keep observing wounded orangutans to see if this behavior continues, as it may suggest the concept of wound treatment might have originated in a common ancestor of both humans and orangutans. Though perhaps this all raises another interesting question. Do leaves ever apply faces to themselves? This Etsy artist aside? Let's hope not. Next, I hope you saved room for story number 10 from back in April.
So we do different dishes that are savory, that are sweet. I like to tell people if it's coming from a New Orleans kitchen, even if it's bizarre, it's going to be tasty.
These babies look tasty to you? Those aren't chicken strips or fried shrimp. No, sir. Those are good old-fashioned fried seasoned cicadas. And they're something of a seasonal plat du jour.
Cicadas aren't usually on the menu because most of the world's cicadas don't take 13 or 17 years to develop like these and emerge by the millions. They are here and there.
Our chef de cuisine here is the curator of animal collections at the Audubon Insectarium in New Orleans. He spoke to the Associated Press from the Insectarium, which features a honeybee exhibit, large ant colony, and, plenty of other insects as it's an insectarium. But unlike the fare served up at your typical food court, this is a place that actually hopes you find some bugs in your food.
When you come to Audubon Insectarium, you'll get to see 50 live animal exhibits. We have a beautiful butterfly garden with hundreds of flying butterflies overlooking the river. And if you have an adventurous palate, you can sample some bugs.
Yes, at the Insectarium's Bug Appetit, bug chefs serve up things like Southwest taco seasoned waxworms. And given it's in New Orleans, a cricket king cake, where a horde of crickets are way easier to find than that little plastic baby. But there's one star insect that's preparing to emerge from a long dormant slumber, so at long last they can finally be mixed with greens, apples, almonds, and drenched in a tasty blueberry vinaigrette. The periodical cicada.
It's like an entire alien species living underneath our feet, and then some prime number years they come out to say hello.
That's a biophysicist with Georgia Tech, who observes that this spring is welcoming an unusual mix of two cicada broods simultaneously. The first time these two broods have brewed out together since 1803.
This year we're gonna get two broods that are gonna emerge at the same time. We are fascinated by a solar eclipse that's gonna happen. This is just like that, but multiply by 100, 1,000. We're gonna get trillions of these amazing living organisms come out of the earth. They come out and they do the two best things they're known to. They'll sing at the top of their voices and they pee in the wind. And as you're walking, you'll feel this mist because there'll be hundreds of cicadas. And that's when you look up, and if you get close enough, they're actually very good camouflage artists. They're very hard to find because they're brown. They camouflage with the bark.
Whether we're able to catch these things because we can see past the camo or they were just off pissing in the wind, our cicada chef back in New Orleans notes that cooked cicadas taste similar to toasted seeds or nuts. These fried guys, prepared with flour and a heavy dose of butter, are ultimately finished off in Creole mustard and soy sauce. But he's still working to make sure the cafe can legally get these things on the menu.
My hope is that we will either acquire ourselves or get some periodical cicadas, the ones that are coming out by the tens of millions in the coming weeks, so that we can serve them as a specialty item here. But we are still working on that.
Now, even though this insectarium might pass out bugs to kids like their Halloween candy, it's not to say that insects have wormed their way onto everyone's grocery lists.
Every culture has things that they love to eat, and maybe things that are taboo or things that people just sort of wrinkle their nose and frown their brow at, and there's no reason to do that with insects.
Our bug barista here isn't alone in thinking that. Your gas station tequila worm sucker aside, insect eating hasn't caught on in the West as it has elsewhere around the world, with the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization claiming that insects supplement the diets of around 2 billion people across the planet. And besides, they've always been a part of the human diet, whether you like it or not. But the UN has also been urging people to eat more bugs, not because they're too cheap to hire an exterminator, but because insects are actually good for our health and the health of our planet. With this UN report stating that entomophagy, the practice of eating insects, can be highly nutritious, good for the environment, and even good for urban and rural economies. Of course, if your palate isn't adventurous enough to welcome a deep-fried cicada onto your plate, our cicada chef still seems to want people to pay respect to the creatures we deride as bugs.
And I have a great interest in getting people to appreciate insects in a very broad sense. And whether that's going out in nature and observing them, conserving rare species, keeping them as pets, or anything in between, being inspired as an artist.
In case you're looking for more inspiration from the humble cicada, one recent study explored how cicadas produce strong jet streams of piss, not unlike mammals. And should you ever find yourself in their line of fire, you might not even need to change your shirt.
If you don't disturb them and scare them and get your iPhone out, you can actually catch these jets that they squirt once every few seconds. One thing I should clarify, that unlike mammalian human pee, cicadas are feeding on xylem, which is again 95% water. It's very low nutrient, and once it's processed by the cicada, they've taken much more of that 5%, so what's coming out is just water. So you don't have to worry. It isn't like our human pee. It's not disgusting. It's just water.
With that in mind, subscribe to @TheNewsRefresh on YouTube for more intriguing news stories like this one about cicada piss, cicada snacks, and more. Enjoy your meal. In July, story number 9 showed us that scientists are actually pretty big babies. On your mark, get set, act like a baby. That's right. These people are wiggling around and shaking toys in front of a camera to best mimic this on-screen infant and ultimately determine which one's the bigger baby. And this whole thing isn't some sort of 90s throwback here. It's science.
The objective of this project is to understand how babies move, understand patterns of how babies move when they're very young, and how this could be a potential marker for neurodiverse conditions like autism.
That's a senior lecturer with the University of Sussex, describing what's the deal with this game of baby boogie here, which fortunately for these scientists is not an activity that involves those infant snot-to-mouth suckers, but a dance-off.
And so what we're doing here is using techniques from computer vision, which is an application of machine learning to images and video data in order to ascertain the position of their limbs over time and look at the patterns of how they're moving around.
Yeah, you see, this team with this university's baby lab has a first-of-its-kind study called Baby Grow, which is seeking to compare baby movements like wriggling, sitting, and crawling to babies' social and communication skills. As noted here by this professor of comparative cognition with the University of Sussex, who spoke to the Associated Press.
The Baby Grow project is very novel in its approach to looking at motor action from birth, but also looking at it unfolding over time. So rather than taking snapshots at 6 months or 12 months, we're looking at it every week to see how it's unfolding, how it's changing in our infants who are at high risk and low risk of autism.
So scientists don't yet know what types of baby movements could suggest an early neurodivergence diagnosis, but they believe that monitoring babies at this critical early stage in their development could help determine what their later lives could be like. So in this analysis, they want to see what variability in baby movements might tell us, across things like limb movements and variations on range, speed, and direction. Experts say in the early stage of child development, those movements are reflexive, not voluntary, unlike those of our adults here, which are very much voluntary.
The core technology behind these types of computer vision methods is machine learning. So it uses some form of pose estimation or human pose estimation. So far, we've only been looking at kind of off-the-shelf human pose estimation models, which are trained on adult data, which obviously has some complexities when applying them to babies. So they don't always have particularly good performance, and that's where some of the challenges lie in applying this kind of analysis.
Of course, to study babies, you can't just rely on adults pretending to be babies, or babies pretending to be adults. You need actual babies. Hence, this Baby Grow project wants to recruit both citizen scientists and 100 unsuspecting baby scientists to help collect movement samples in family homes, which scientists think will give them enough data to analyze. The project says that over the course of the first 18 months of their lives, babies taking part in the study will be outfitted in a high-tech onesie with built-in motion detectors. And parents will regularly take and send video back to the researchers to make sure the sensors inside the onesies are functioning. These scientists are actually currently recruiting infants and parents in the UK. And the work this research requires doesn't actually seem that out of the ordinary for new parents, many of whom have already outfitted their child with high-tech clothing to collect as much data as possible, and are already recording daily baby videos to text over to Gigi. This Baby Grow team notes it's made up of researchers passionate about early development and autism research. And with all this baby movement data, they hope they'll be able to better understand the early signs of neurodivergence.
This kind of research is the way forward for us to determine children who might be at risk of autism earlier than we currently do. And I think it's our best hope of also starting to think about the development of motor interventions earlier, so that we're not waiting until these children actually develop social and communication deficits before we start treating them.
Now, these adults going full Ally McBeal here are simply demonstrating some of this baby movement detection technology at the recent Royal Society Summer Science Exhibition in London, an annual event that highlights some of the UK's most interesting science research. But scientists ultimately hope that studying baby boogieing will help target early treatments for neurodivergent conditions.
Our next steps would be to think about what are the features that might be associated with risk. We're using computer vision and AI technology to see patterns that our eyes can't see. And these would be targeting things like the variability and the complexity of the infant's movements. Where we think that children might be at risk, we're hoping to be able to indicate that to parents and GPs much earlier on so that they can receive support and treatment within their infant years rather than waiting to the toddler years and beyond.
From August, bad news for all you lovers of symbolism with story number 8. Does this look like a happy couple to you? Swans, of course, are icons of love and fidelity. But just because they symbolize sticking together, sometimes literally when it comes to those pond boats, that doesn't mean they're above ruffling some feathers when it comes to the other fine birds in the flock.
Divorce is not uncommon. So about 10% of the swan pairs don't last. So we've got a pair that has been around and together since the beginning of the study, 18 years, pretty good innings, and others that get together for a month or two and then decide, no, this is not for them.
That's a professor with Melbourne University, and he's talking about the monogamy of swans. Yes, the monogamy of swans. Experts have long believed that swans stay in one single relationship for their whole life. And while these researchers have pretty much confirmed that to be the case, well, it turns out there's plenty of around too.
1 in 6 of the cygnets on the lake are fathered by a male from outside the pair bond.
Yeah, even swans cheat on each other, as if that's going to make your girlfriend feel better. Now, these academics here are part of a black swan study in Australia. Can't you read the sign? And not only is the health of these creatures being checked, hence this one getting weighed like luggage, but they're being outfitted with tracking collars that monitor swan movements. And while scientists found that many long-term monogamous swan couples synchronize many of their activities, things like swimming and eating, that doesn't mean the longer they're together, the better the relationship is. Ouch.
Being together for a longer time doesn't actually make you more synchronous than partners that have been together for a year or two.
While some steady swan couples will do the same things at the same time throughout the whole year in a true act of heartfelt synchronicity, like so many of us in the human world watching those 3 ellipses in an iMessage, some swans simply need a break from one another. And hey, with talent like that swimming around out there, can you really blame them? Here's a PhD student with Melbourne University.
These breaks would probably range for, on average, about 3 months over the non-breeding period before they would come back together before this sort of time of year now.
And no, it's not just the male swans flying away for a pack of cigarettes for months at a time here. Scientists determined that both male and female swans like to go on these breaks. One conclusion of this study is that, well, much like the sex lives of college girls, the sex lives of black swans are far more complex than originally thought. For these particular swans in the study in Melbourne, which live in the middle of the city and have to contend with a nearby Formula 1 Grand Prix every year, the researchers found that they're actually quite healthy, though they think that humans should still treat them with a little more care.
We lose swans to collisions with cars every year. We spend more time than we wish we would extracting fish hooks.
Maybe swans cheat in divorce because they tire of seeing the same fish-hooked mouth day in, day out. Or they get overwhelmed with anxiety knowing their beloved might be run down in the car park and want to keep their options open. And while it's hard for any of us to get inside the actual mind of a swan, try as we might, our researcher here does observe that when it comes to swan relationships and human relationships, your ex might have been right all along when they said, we need a break.
I'm always a bit wary of extrapolating to humans in terms of animal behavior, but I think they do remind us of what it's like to be in a monogamous human relationship, and especially I think this finding of birds spending time together and time apart is a sort of a reminder of that.
And now here's a serving of story number 7 from September.
So we find a rare and desirable cocoa species around the planet. We then take a cutting of the cocoa bean, put them onto plates, and we trick basically the cocoa cells to grow and divide. And after a certain level of growth, we're able to harvest that and transform that into chocolate.
That guy's the CEO of California Cultured, and this trickery he's talking about is the process by which his startup creates lab-grown cocoa. He says that they put cocoa beans in a vat with some sugar water, they reproduce quickly and reach maturity in just a week, rather than the 6 to 8 months that a traditional harvest usually takes. It's a process the company describes as something along the lines of rapid indoor farming. And this horticultured Hershey isn't just being scienced up just to help chocolate makers around the world reduce their reliance on costly Loompa labor.
So climate change is impacting the chocolate industry by, first of all, making it too warm for many species to prosper, and that has led to massive drops in yield around the world in cocoa.
Yeah, as we've told you before here on your daily news refresh, please subscribe. Experts believe that climate change is coming after some of the foods we enjoy the most. From coffee and chocolate to beer and wine, potentially turning your work breaks and happy hours into events that are even more uncomfortable than usual. In chocolate's case, cocoa trees grow in regions about 20 degrees north and south of the equator, in areas with warm weather and abundant rain, like West Africa and South America. Not only is climate change expected to dry out some of those lands, but you might have noticed that your cute little Easter bunnies were more expensive this year, thanks to a surge in cocoa prices in West Africa, where plant disease and weather changes affecting crops drove up cocoa prices. The Associated Press spoke with the executive director of the Fine Cacao and Chocolate Institute, who said 3/4 of the world's cocoa is grown in Central and West Africa, yet only 4% of the stuff is consumed there, as the demand for all your Valentine's sweets for your true loves out there, plus the chocolate-covered onions for the rest of us who are sweet on the outside but nasty on the inside, is being driven by the US and Europe. As the National Confectionery Association claims the market for this stuff hit $25 billion in 2023. That is a hell of a lot of Timothée Chalamet statues. And a growing consumer consciousness over what it takes to produce this stuff is driving a need for change.
Unfortunately, what's been happening with the rapid love of chocolate and coffee globally, this has led to devastating global deforestation in these tropical areas. In addition, there's issues of slave labor, pollution.
Thus, cell-cultivated chocolate. After all, scientists are already growing diamonds and pieces of chicken in labs, so why not top off that futuristic engagement dinner with a cutting-edge dessert?
We're basically developing the underlying technology that you could actually grow chocolate and coffee anywhere in the world without some of these exploitative or destructive practices.
Now, this California company isn't the only one trying to craft sustainable options or alternatives for cocoa. The Sweet Teeth at Mars have a research facility at the University of California, Davis that's aimed at making cocoa plants more resilient. Pictured here are a bunch of M&Ms that aren't dressed quite as sexy as the internet's accustomed to. And hey, UC Davis just so happens to be the same school that's also got a coffee research center that's focused on the future development of that crop too. After all, not everyone's on board with lab-grown foods. Back in May, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis banned the sale of lab-grown meat in the state over what he described in a press release as the global elite's plan to force the world to eat meat grown in a petri dish or bugs to achieve their authoritarian goals, an apparent response to reports by the likes of the World Economic Forum that have suggested that alternative proteins, including insects, are necessary to meet the world's growing food needs. California Cultured is ultimately hoping to get permission from the Food and Drug Administration to call their product chocolate, because it's genetically identical to the real stuff, even though it's not harvested from a tree. Our cocoa CEO thinks their chocolate might ultimately end up being called something slightly different, like brewery chocolate. But no matter what you name this lovely concoction that turns into these little pellets, as noted by this program manager with a nonprofit that's helping these California chocolatiers with their biomanufacturing system, the key word for this stuff might not be sweet, but sustainable.
As climate change progresses, we're only going to see more threats to our supply chain. And so it's great to have the opportunity to produce things domestically and sustainably.
Next up, let's call this story number 6. So this is an elephant called Donatella. A researcher is about to play a recording that contains what's believed to be her name, only for Donatella to perk up her ears and appear to call back. Now, that low rumble you just heard isn't the name Donatella per se. That's a name humans gave that elephant. Her real name is apparently, something like... Now, I can't make a sound like that unless I'm really hungry, but elephants can. And according to a new study, scientists think these rumbling African savanna elephants are able to call each other by unique names.
Elephants are highly social, highly vocal species. We know there's a lot going on with their communication, but we haven't been able to decipher much. It's quite complicated, the structure of their calls, and we know that if we could get insight into what they're saying, we could really get a new perception on how they think.
That's a professor at the Colorado State University College of Natural Resources and the co-author of this new study out of Nature, Ecology, and Evolution. African elephants address one another with individually specific name-like calls. A pretty succinct title that basically finds that, well, they think elephants have names for each other. Researchers used machine learning, the same kind of tech that's helped other biologists figure out what they think is the phonetic alphabet of sperm whales. As we told you about recently here in a news refresh, please subscribe. And with a sound library of elephant vocalizations recorded at nature reserves in Kenya, quite the step up from whatever's available in Apple Music, a computer model was trained to figure out the acoustic signature of what might be considered an elephant's name. Researchers then followed a group of elephants around in jeeps and played back some recorded calls to the creatures, who would occasionally respond to the sound of their name by flapping their ears around or lifting their trunk. In this video, like the one up top, an elephant human named Margaret hears a recorded call that contains her name and immediately calls back.
Elephants do these really interesting behaviors where sometimes when they're in a big group, a female or a matriarch of a group will give a call and the entire group will respond. They'll group up around her, they'll follow her or whatever. And then other times she gives seemingly a very similar call and nobody will respond, nobody will react to that call except for a single elephant in the group. And that elephant will respond or come up to her or whatever. And so that sort of indicates that they have a means by which to communicate who they want to talk to.
Now, elephants aren't the only creatures believed to use personal names. Some dolphins and parrots, for instance, can imitate name calls. But what's interesting here is that the study says these elephants probably don't rely on imitation. They're using something akin to arbitrary words. And just like humans, the types who will plaster their name on their chest so you'll please talk to them at this networking event, these elephants may specifically address one another without just imitating the sound of a call like a parrot. What's tricky here about studying these elephant rumbles is that they include infrasonic sounds, which are below the range of human hearing, so scientists don't exactly know which specific part of these elephant vocalizations are the elephant's name. In this piece in the conversation, the study's lead researcher, a biologist with Cornell University, says they want to figure out next how to isolate out names for specific individuals, so they can do things like see if elephants talk about other elephants by name when they're not around. Hi, I'm Babar. I married my cousin Celeste. Have you seen her? But this study could eventually help figure out how human language evolved, and as this lead researcher told the Associated Press, even help chart a course that could change human-elephant relations in the future.
No matter how sophisticated our technology or understanding of elephant calls gets, if they aren't talking to each other, if that's not something that they do, then we wouldn't be able to talk to them. But in terms of eavesdropping on their communication, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do that already. That's kind of what we were doing in this study. And I think that there's definitely a lot of potential to learn more about elephant calls. I think we've just scratched the surface of how complex their communication is.
Now, I'm no elephant researcher, but check out this clip. I think I've decoded what this elephant is saying. Okay, top 5. But before we keep going, don't forget to give us a like and a hot subscribe, okay? Great. Let's pray that you did that so you can enjoy story number 5 from December.
Hello, Jesus. Do you have some advice for us in this time?
In these challenging times, remember that in the face of adversity, love and faith are your steadfast guides. Just as I calm the stormy seas, so too can peace be found within your heart. Amidst life's tempests, let kindness and compassion steer your course.
Yeah, that advice coming out of that sideways MacBook is being offered up by AI Jesus. From Delta Airlines to Kroger, chatbots can be found everywhere these days. But rather than rebooking flights or negotiating coupons, this divine display situated behind the privacy screen of a confessional offers up far more existential interactions.
They really ask him serious questions. So there are really topics like relationship, love, topics like about God, how can I experience God? Or about the situation in the world, the wars, though the fear of the people, they ask him what to do.
That's the chapel theologian at Peter's Chapel in Lucerne, Switzerland, where this project, appropriately titled Deus in Machina, saw this highly spiritual Siri of sorts take on conversations from hundreds of visitors. This 2-month project, which started running in late August and just had a report come out about it, was intended to recognize the growing importance of artificial intelligence in our lives and explore the limits of human trust in a machine. Which, yeah, considering how often virtual assistants struggle to simply turn on the lights, trusting an avatar resembling the Son of God to explain the origin of light might seem like quite the leap of faith.
Many people came to talk with him, so we have like 900 conversations now registered. All ages also, I can say. There were young people, older people. What was really interesting to see that the people really talked with him in a serious way.
Several visitors ended up filling out a questionnaire about their experience with AI Jesus, with people self-identifying as everything from Christian to Muslim to agnostic, and hundreds of their confessional conversations also ended up being transcribed anonymously for future study. Hope you didn't say anything too juicy. Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but AI Jesus isn't actually Jesus. The whole thing's being billed as an artistic experiment, and our avatar here, which uses the voice and likeness of a real person, though not that one, generated responses using OpenAI's GPT-4 Omni.
The response that the AI Jesus forms is actually partly based on Bible excerpts.
That's an IT specialist from Lucerne University of Applied Sciences and Arts who worked on the technical side of the project here.
All knowledge and wisdom ultimately come from God. If used wisely, AI can indeed be a tool to explore the wonders of creation, deepen our understanding of Scripture, and foster connections among people. Yet it remains essential to seek God with all your heart and soul beyond any technology.
In spite of this self-assuring software, people have called this blessed binary everything from blasphemous to the work of the devil. And while the Catholic Church itself has been navigating artificial intelligence's holy waters, from the Vatican appointing a friar from a medieval Franciscan order as its top expert on AI, to Pope Francis pushing for an international peace treaty to ensure the ethical use of the technology, it's clear right now that, much like faith itself, whether or not the same tools that power your cover letter generator can help you navigate deep questions of the divine remains an open question.
I'm still not sure how I feel about the whole thing altogether. Like I'm still like waiting for more reactions. But until now, like everything, at least in Switzerland, was very positive.
For those of us who dream about playing with toys on the moon, great news with June's story number 4. From space shuttles to vintage galaxy explorers, to this idea for an homage to that old Méliès film, space builds are as much of a part of LEGO's DNA as screaming "God damn it" after stepping on a brick you forgot to put away. But the European Space Agency has just started showing off a new interlocking brick design of their own, the ESA Space Brick. Yep, looks a hell of a lot like a Lego. But the idea here isn't just to give astronauts some toys to help kill time, now that they've found that missing tomato aboard the International Space Station that we told you about a while back here on your News Refresh. Please subscribe. See, the idea here is that the ESA's space engineers want to be able to build and test structures that could be made using mineral fragments from the surface of the moon. We don't have a lot of those minerals known as lunar regolith here on Earth, given this is Earth, not the moon, and we certainly don't want to start building space housing using any of those 96 bags of human waste we've left behind as moon trash. But these space engineers, being space engineers, came up with a novel solution. They started grinding up a 4.5 billion-year-old meteor that crashed into Africa 20 years ago. You see, the dust from that ground-up meteorite was similar enough to lunar regolith to help them 3D print these bad boys here seen in a highly secure briefcase. LEGO and the ESA just shared this story, and while the concept of having scientists 3D print millions of these things in space to make giant lunar Lego apartment buildings might sound a bit impractical, these things are part of a project to design and build launch pads and astronaut shelters on the moon. Again, Europe isn't preparing to send inch-tall astronauts into space. This is just another way of testing out new building techniques for future lunar structures. And LEGO and the ESA hopes these things will inspire curiosity in children. Thus, they're on display now through September in a handful of LEGO stores across the world, including locations in New York, Chicago, and the Mall of America in Minnesota. And hey, even if space isn't your thing, you're still free to be inspired to create your own LEGO ideas. Like this 550-piece LEGO toilet complete with a flush arm, flapper, and overflow tube that was ultimately not approved for sale. Huh, too bad. For the bronze medal, we've got a great story from June that's quite appropriate for coming in third.
So this is the third thumb. So it's a flexible thumb that's controlled with two motors that's worn on the wrist. On my left foot is doing this movement, so it's pulling up and back, and it's proportional, so I can go fast or slow. And then my right toe is doing this. pulling across.
Yeah, you heard that right. That accessorized appendage there is a third thumb, a device that makes it possible to do, well, another finger's worth of actions with your hand. Hold an extra egg, play cards, wave at yourself. You know, hand stuff.
This is a technology that is specifically designed for able-bodied people, people with 2 hands, 5 fingers, to allow them to do more with their hands. And by this, we're trying to break beyond the flesh and blood limitations of our own body and allow you to interact with the world in a completely new way.
Break beyond the flesh and blood limitations of our own body sounds like a line straight out of Videodrome, but that woman speaking to the Associated Press is a researcher named Danny Claude, who worked with the University of Cambridge to design the third thumb. As she showed off up top, a pressure sensor that gets placed under each of your big toes or feet moves the third thumb with a proportional amount of pressure applied, which she says makes this bonus phalange pretty easy to get used to using.
When you grow up with 2 hands, 10 fingers, this is kind of quite weird. It's very different to kind of learning how to use a whole prosthetic arm. Any kind of tool we learn to use in our daily lives requires a little bit of training and experience within the context of our day. The thumb is no different, but what's really exciting about the thumb is it seems quite complex from the beginning, and it's really not. And that's what we're showing in this study, is that people can quickly, easily use it within 1 minute, which is really exciting. It doesn't take, years of training or even months or even days.
Third thumb was first shown off back in 2022 at a science exhibition in the UK, where out of 596 people who got to try the thing out, 98% of them were able to wear, operate, and carry out a task with it, including kids and this person picking up some paint while also holding a paintbrush. And even though a handful of people couldn't make use of the handful, researchers think this third thumb holds a lot of promise in highly skilled professional environments.
We are also really excited about potential opportunities of using the thumb to enhance productivity in work settings, specifically for people that are relying on their hands' manual dexterity in order to accomplish their work. And this can be anywhere between manual laborers that are trying to solder a complicated gear kit, or even surgeons that have to negotiate between many instruments at the same time.
That's a professor of cognitive neuroscience with the University of Cambridge, who also observes this thing isn't just about helping hitchhikers double their chances. Third thumb might also be useful for people with accessibility needs.
Even though the thumb is designed for able-bodied people, we can easily envisage situations where people with disabilities could enjoy or benefit from the extra help of the thumb. So we're trying to build the thumb as an alternative to traditional assistive technologies.
A newly published report about the third thumb in Scientific Robotics found that there's a tangible demonstration of initial usability of this thing for a broad demographic. And these researchers hope that with further testing, this thing could help design a new relationship with technology and redefine human capabilities. Sounds like a thumbs up to me. In second place from July, 2 words: radioactive rhinos. So this is fresh video of a recent nuclear test out of South Africa. Yeah, you heard that right. Usually the phrase nuclear test conjures up images like these and friends like these. But no, we didn't upload the wrong video from our safari vacation or something. These are researchers carrying out a test of nuclear technology with these rhinos.
What you've just seen here is something new, something completely novel. We are now using radioisotopes inserted in the horn to make the horn, to devalue the horn in the eyes of end users, because we've got to do something new and something different to reduce poaching.
Yeah, radioactive rhinos. And this test isn't to turn these guys into souped up Donkey Kong characters. This team of veterinarians, researchers, and nuclear experts are inserting radioisotopes into the horns of 20 rhinos to help combat poaching. This guy here is the director of radiation and health physics at South Africa's University of the Witwatersrand and heads up this rhisotope project. And speaking of heads up, if you don't enjoy watching videos of people drilling into rhinos, there's plenty of other fun, lighthearted content here on At the News Refresh. Please subscribe. Like this little piece about a retired couple that's trying to visit every single Texas Roadhouse restaurant. But if you do want to see a rhino get drilled, great. Here's this team tranquilizing one of them, here's that professor drilling a hole into the horn, and here he is inserting the radioactive isotopes. And you thought going to the dentist was scary. Now the urgency for a project like this stems from the fact that according to the International Union for Conservation of Nature, there used to be around 500,000 rhinos around the world at the start of the 20th century. But today, that number's dwindled down to about 27,000, driven by the awful demand for rhino horns on the black market. South Africa, which has the largest rhino population at around 16,000 of the things, loses about 500 of these creatures a year to poachers.
The kind of standard response by the kind of conservation system in South Africa has been to basically dehorn rhinos on scale.
This professor is dean of the science department at the University of the Witwatersrand, who observes that dehorning rhinos is a disruptive solution.
And we haven't had much of that experience in the past, but now after a few years of having done that, we can see that it's really impacted very negatively on the social structure of rhinos, and this is awful, really. I mean, rhinos are very territorial, and the moment you begin to kind of impact on the ways in which they can defend their territory.
Instead, with radioactive rhinos,
the rhino remains intact with its horn. It's able to continue to engage with its fellow rhinos in a socially meaningful way, and in that sense it's a non-destructive, non-invasive way in which we're trying to deal with the problem.
Not only does this radioactivity make rhino horns seem a little less valuable, kind of like the long-term value of any given radioactive ape NFT, but this test could ultimately help curb the trafficking of these things in the first place. Notes our professor here who talked to the Associated Press.
We are also doing this because it makes it significantly easier to intercept these horns as they are being trafficked over international borders, because there is a global network of radiation monitors that have been designed to prevent nuclear terrorism, and we're piggybacking on the back of that.
Now, as for the radioactivity itself, don't worry. They're not creating a whole herd of horny Dr. Manhattans. The founder of a rhino sanctuary known as the Rhino Orphanage, which is allowing its rhinos to be tested here, observes that the doses of this radioactive material being inserted into these rhino horns are very low.
You get a thing like nuclear medicine nowadays, so it's not. Nuclear and radioactivity not only kills, but it also cures. So it's perfectly safe for the rhino, but it's not safe for the poacher because they can't move the horn. And this is really why it's all about it. It's a magic idea.
Magic, of course, that some critics believe is indeed an illusion. Like the chairperson here of the Private Rhino Owners Association, a conservation group, who doubts that nuking up rhinos will deter poachers.
They have worked out other ways of moving rhino horn out of the country, out of the continent, or off the continent, not through traditional border crossings. They bypass the border crossings because they know that is the area of their highest risk of confiscation or interception.
For the next 6 months, our team of experts here is going to monitor the health of these rhinos to figure out how valuable this project is. And if it pans out, they ultimately hope this process can be replicated to protect other wild species vulnerable to poaching. And number one, our top science and tech story of 2024 beams directly to you in outer space from Lexington, Kentucky back in January.
This is the first time that we as a species have ever sent out a travel ad inviting aliens to come visit.
Yeah, you heard that right. A team out of the United States just beamed an interstellar message into the far reaches of outer space, inviting anyone who might be listening out there in the cosmos to come check out our pale blue dot. And those rolling out this galactic red carpet aren't just giving our potential alien guests a blanket invite to Earth. Perhaps to gaze upon the splendor of our planet's oceans, rainforests, volcanoes, ice sheets, or even that giant clock Jeff Bezos is building inside of a mountain. No, they just want the aliens to check out Lexington, Kentucky.
Lexington, Kentucky just beamed the world's first interstellar travel ad into outer space. With the help of local scientists and scholars, Visit Lex created an advertising campaign designed to invite extraterrestrials to visit Lexington.
Yes, Lexington, Kentucky. Perhaps you might not first think of what's ranked the 60th largest city in the United States, well behind Wichita but far above Newark, as the place that Martians may decide to make first contact. But then again, if you travel 235 trillion miles to reach the fields of the bluegrass state, maybe you could use a nice pour of bourbon. So a team of scientists and scholars worked with Visit Lex, the city's tourist bureau, and used a modified laser to beam a coded advertisement 40 light years away to a solar system known as TRAPPIST-1, where Space.com says some rocky worlds might be able to support liquid water on their surfaces, meaning our potential alien visitors may already have their swim trunks packed.
We're targeting the TRAPPIST-1 system because you might actually get an answer in somebody's lifetime if there's somebody there watching. But the reason scientists have been interested in it lately is because of a large number of planets that it has in what is considered to be the habitable zone. So there could be life there. Why not send a signal and see if they answer?
Earthlings, of course, have sent out plenty of potential methods of communication to all the aliens considering nosing around our little galaxy here. Back in 1977, the 2 Voyager spacecraft were sent out to tour Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and beyond. They were equipped with what's known as the Voyager Golden Records, essentially audio-visual time capsules that contain images, music, sounds, and greetings from Earth. Selected for NASA by astronomer Carl Sagan and his wife, producer Ann Droyan. The idea was that if extraterrestrials stumbled upon this craft and could decipher the symbolic instructions on the front, they could then play back the 70s era content encoded in analog form. The records including everything from mathematical definitions, to diagrams of people and the planet, to a picture of a guy eating a sandwich, to this audio recording of what a bus sounds like. Anyway, Lexington, Kentucky's laser message sent towards TRAPPIST-1 also spelled out some universal earthly and Kentucky-focused knowledge.
The message contains a bitmap key with prime numbers, the elements of life, molecules for water, ethanol, and dopamine, plus horses and Lexington's iconic bluegrass landscape.
And much like our golden records, Lexington's message also contains some special features, like this image of a horse pasture, this image of what appears to be a Rye Manhattan, and a beautiful shot of downtown Lexington, including this bank's building. There's also a selfie that was taken involving people who were there at the message's transmission, plus some audio from a local blues player, who sounds better than a 1970s bus.
Of all of the things that we've been beaming into space, why not a positive, friendly message? I think saying, hey, we're nice and friendly people, we have horses and bourbon and dopamine, don't eat us.
Now, as friendly as these Kentuckians may be, not all scientists agree it's a great idea to be shouting out into the void, hey, come check out the rest of our vinyl collection. One notable opponent was the late famed astronomer Stephen Hawking. Space.com notes, according to a documentary that referred to a potentially habitable planet, Hawking remarked that one day we might receive a signal from that alien world, but we should be wary of answering back. Meeting an advanced civilization could be like the Native Americans encountering Columbus. That didn't turn out so well. Well, this tourist bureau doesn't appear to have heeded the late astrophysicist's warning and got the FAA's approval to blast out their interstellar ad campaign from a horse park. As of right now, the tourist bureau says there hasn't been any unusual activity reported above the Kentucky skies, though I guess that's to be expected. This convenient countdown on their website notes their marketing message isn't set to reach the TRAPPIST-1 system for another 38 years and change. Until then, whether you're a human being or a mysterious creature that's fully assimilated without anyone taking note, you're invited to swing by Lexington's Visitor Center to write your own postcard to the aliens. Because as these scientists and scholars note, they think Lexington's worth the 4-decade journey.
We have this neat hub of creativity. It's just people who get to have the freedom to think a little bit differently. It does seem as if it's this place that is very welcoming.
Here's our chance to really demonstrate that we are a beautiful culture, a beautiful community, and that we want to share that with the galaxy, that we're the best place on Earth.
So yeah, the smarter minds among us were up to a lot of interesting stuff back in 2024. And who the hell knows what 2025 holds for the world of science and technology. As for what 2025 holds for us, well, subscribe to the channel to find out. And get more videos like these, in theory. Bye.